All right, welcome back, students. This is Mr. Valana. We are doing some algebra, and in our first video, we learned how to write algebraic expressions. We learned about variables, and we just got our feet wet in how to translate from English sentences or expressions to algebraic expressions. By the way, in the description to this video, I have a link that will take you to the notes for this lesson. And on there, there's some more practice that you can do in the translation from English to math, which is a huge, huge thing. If you can learn how to go from English to math, you are on your way to the big leagues. All right, so we're going to learn how to write and evaluate algebraic expressions. All right, I got a problem right out of the GED textbook. And here's how it goes. It says the distance in miles between Elizabeth's house and her grandparents' house is 3 times the number of miles between her house and her brother's apartment. Woo! Right? If Elizabeth's brother lives 39 miles away from her house, how far away from her house is her grandparents' house? This is one of those problems where our eyes kind of glaze over and we're like, right? But hey, the best way to tackle this is just break it down, right? We learned 2 steps. First thing is you need to define your variables. What are my variables here? All right, so we're talking about houses or apartments, right? But more specifically, we're talking about distance between houses, right? I got a few beautiful sketches here. I have Elizabeth's house, I have her brother's house, and I have her grandparents' house, right? So we're really talking about the distance, right? So I'm going to go ahead and define my variables. All right, I'm going to say, hey, the distance to her grandma's house, let's let the distance from, how about I just do this? Distance to brother's apartment. I did this backwards. Sorry. Let's let B equal distance to brother's apartment. Right? You could have used any letter that you want. You could have used A for apartment. You could have used D sub B. You could have done anything. You just choose what you want. I'm going to use B. So I know that every time I see a B, that means, hey, that's the distance to her brother's apartment from her house, right? All right, so now I got to figure out what variable am I going to use for grandma's house, for grandparents' house. Well, I'm going to go ahead and use G. G equals distance to grandparents' house. All right? Specifically the distance from her house to the grandparents' house. All right? So I could label this as this long orange line. I could label that as that's the distance to grandma's house, right? So I'm going to label that as capital G. And the distance to her brother's house, that was just capital B. All right? So I have 2 variables here. Okay, so now that I have my variables defined, things get a lot easier. All right, so the distance between Elizabeth's house and her grandparents' house. Okay, so what are we talking about? From Elizabeth's to grandparents, what variable am I going to use? G, right? So G equals, what do I say equals? See that is right there? Anytime you see the word is, it almost always means equals, right? Like it's 2 and 2 is 4, right? Equals 4, all right? Or it could be was, past tense, were, okay? Usually the verb is the equal sign. Okay, so the distance between Elizabeth's house and grandma's house, that's G, is is what? 3 times. Oh, okay. So I'm going to put a 3 there. 3 times, well, that means multiplication. 3 times what? 3 times the number of miles between her house and her brother's apartment. Ooh, well, what variable represents the distance between her house and her brother's apartment? B, right? I already defined that, so I know what that means. So I want you to just take a look at the beauty of mathematics. You see this long English sentence, right? It goes from here. I mean, how many words are there? It's very wordy. Hey, the distance between Elizabeth's house and her grandma's house is 3 times as much as the distance between her house and her brother's house. I mean, blah, 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 right? Look at math. Distance to grandma's house is 3 times her brother's distance to her brother's house. Boom, done. See how short and to the point mathematics is? I love it, right? It's a different language. This right here is that entire first sentence. All right, so we have a second sentence here. All right, if Elizabeth's brother lives 39 miles away from her house, how far away from her house is her grandparents' house? Okay, so if Elizabeth's brother, okay, which one am I going to use? Am I going to use the B or the G? I'm going to use the B because that stands for brother. I see how important identifying your variables is? Okay, so if Elizabeth's brother lives 39 miles away, oh, so where am I going to put that 39? Am I going to put it here with the G, or am I going to substitute it for the B? Well, we're talking about her brother, so we would substitute it for the B. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So I got G equals 3 times B, and B is 39, because that's the distance between Elizabeth and her brother. It's 39 miles. They gave us that. Now we can figure out how far her grandma lives from Elizabeth. Right? So grandma, the distance to grandma's house is just 3 times 39. And let's see, 3 times 39. I never did learn my 39s. So let's go ahead and do that over here. All right, you probably already got it. 3 times 9 is 27. 3 times 3 is 9. Plus 2 is 11. So I get 117. 117 miles. Now, it's very important that you always check for, there's 2 things. Did I answer the question? The question is, how far away from her house is her grandparents' house? Yes, I found that. I found the distance to her grandma's house. The second thing you need to know is my answer reasonable? Okay. Well, the distance to grandma's house, the grandparents' house, is 3 times more than her brother, right? It's 3 times longer. You can see it in the picture. So if her brother was 39 miles, we would expect the distance to her grandma's house to be much bigger, right? Much larger, which it is. So that is a reasonable answer. And indeed, that is my answer. So the distance to grandparents' house is 117 miles, right? So it's going to be a little bit hard to pay regular visits to the grandparents. All right? So I hope that was helpful. Remember, the first thing is define your variables. I did that. Second thing is see if you can set up an algebraic, this actually is an algebraic equation, actually. Okay? See if you can set up either an expression or an equation that will model your problem so you can either evaluate it or solve it. All right? Hope this was helpful to you. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. That way you get all the videos, you get notified. All right? Until next time, may God richly bless you, my friends.